Navigation menus are one of those components where most people either copy what someone else has done, or they try to make it themselves and get it wrong. In this video, we're going to create a fully responsive and accessible navigation menu using nothing but HTML, CSS, and the Alpine.js library. This is going to help you understand what goes into making a menu, so that you can either copy it and modify it how you want, or you can take that knowledge and create your own menu the right way. Since everything I'm doing is pure HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you can use any editor that you want. This is all going to work equally well whether you use Notepad, VS Code, or even Vim. I'm using the Pinegrow web editor since it's my tool of choice, and it lets me show you everything that's going on in a single window without jumping between tools and files. Once we're finished building the menu, I'm going to use the Pinegrow web editor to go one step further and turn it into a block that you can use inside of a WordPress block theme or copy into your theme template. As we go through this, feel free to work along with me, or you can jump into my GitHub page linked below to grab a copy of the project files. Again, you don't need Pinegrow for anything other than the WordPress pieces, and the files in the project directory will work just fine on their own. I'm Adam Lowe, president of Peak Performance Digital. You can learn more about me at adamlowe.io or my agency's website at peakperformancedigital.com. If you find content like this helpful, I'd love it if you could give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. This is going to be a long tutorial, so I've split it into three main parts: prep, structure and style, and menu interactions. Each part builds off the previous ones, so you'll probably want to watch it from start to finish. I've included chapter markers so you can take a break and easily jump back to the section you were on. First, we'll look at the requirements for the menu and a demo of what we're building. Then we'll prep our project and write some baseline CSS to get things going. The last thing we'll do before diving into the menu is to create a sample page so we can see the menu with placeholder layout and some text. The menu structure and styling section is by far the longest and most complex. We'll start out by creating the top-level main menu. The main menu submenus will be next. Then we'll wrap up by creating the Hamburger button, the mobile panel, and the mobile menu. Finally, with the menu created and styled, we'll use Alpine.js to make it do what we want. We'll configure the Hamburger button to open and close the mobile menu panel. Then we'll move on to configuring the Submenu Interactions for the main menu, and then the mobile menu. As a little bonus at the end, we'll take a few minutes to show you how we can take that menu we just created and use it as part of a WordPress theme. Believe it or not, this is the quickest and easiest part of the whole tutorial. So, without any further ado, let's take a look at the requirements and the finished project. I'm going to start off by showing you the W3C ARIA Authoring Practices Guide page for the disclosure pattern. It's important to understand that we want to use this disclosure pattern, not the menu or menu bar pattern, despite the fact that we colloquially call this component a navigation menu. In the world of the W3C, a menu is referring to an application menu, and the thing that we use on websites is simply a set of navigation links. It's counterintuitive, I know. The page we're on right now shows the pattern for the widget that enables content to be collapsed and hidden or expanded and shown. For our purposes, this is going to be the Hamburger menu button and the submenu dropdown that we see on the top level menu item. There are a few important things that we want to note on this page related to accessibility. First, we need to make sure that both the Enter key and the Space key activates the control and toggles the visibility of the content. Next, we have to make sure that certain roles, states, and properties are set correctly. This means that we need to use a button element or an element with the role of button to control the dropdown. We also have to make sure that the button element has the attribute of ARIA expanded set to true when the content's visible, and ARIA expanded set to false when the content's hidden. Although it doesn't explicitly say it on the page, we also need to be sure that other top-level links on our menu that do not have dropdowns don't include this ARIA expanded attribute, since that will confuse screen reader users by making them think that dropdown exists even when it may not. Lastly, and optionally, we can add an ARIA controls attribute to the button that references the ID of the content element. I like using this whenever possible since it links the elements together and because it gives screen reader users more information about what the button does. The next thing we're going to look at is the example disclosure navigation menu page. The W3C provides two examples, one with top-level links and one without. This video is going to use the one with the top-level links since it's more common in my experience and because it's more complex. Once you understand this, adapting it to a menu without a top-level link will be simple. Before I go on, I want to point out that mixing dropdowns with and without top-level links is a bad idea, both from a usability perspective and for accessibility. Pick one on your site and stick with it. Clicking over to the Disclosure Navigation example page, you'll see a prominent warning about the difference between this pattern and the menu pattern. This is what we discussed just a few minutes ago. Scrolling down, we have an example menu and a list of accessibility features. These are in addition to the disclosure control that we've reviewed on the previous page. I'm going to go through each one since they're important to understand before we start building our menu. Number one, The navigation links should be wrapped in a navigation landmark with an appropriate ARIA label. Number 2. The navigation links need to be semantically correct. For our purposes, this means that they should be in an unordered list, with nested unordered lists for submenu items, and that a disclosure button should be controlling the visibility of the submenu. Number 3. Pressing the escape key will close the dropdown if you're inside of it. Also, moving focus out of the navigation region will close the open dropdown. And number 4, you can optionally include support for navigating through items using the arrow keys, the home button, and the end button. It's very important to note that you must still support tabbing through the links, even if you include arrow key support. For the menu I'm creating in this demo, we aren't going to include support for these extra keys, just the standard tab, space, enter, and escape. Moving down the page, we see a nice reference showing us how the menu should behave for keyboard users. We've already covered this, so I'm not going to read through it again, but it is a handy reference. Next, we have the role, property, state, and tab index attribute table. Again, we've already covered most of these, and it's mainly a handy reference. The one that we haven't discussed yet is ARIA current. This attribute lets the visitor know which links in the menu you're currently on. This is generally something that's going to be controlled by the CMS or application, so it's not something I'm going to cover as part of the menu component. And lastly, we have the example HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for the menu. If you want to take this and run with it after reviewing all the code, go right ahead. It works well and it gets the job done. However, it doesn't include any of the responsiveness or other things that I'm going to cover in our demo menu. Here we are inside the Pinegrow web editor. I'm going to start by showing you what our finished project will look like, then I'll create a new blank project for us to work in. As you can see, we have previews of both the desktop and mobile breakpoints. This tool also lets us see our project files, the tree view of the DOM, our element properties, and any styles that are applied to the selected element. I'll also keep the code window open so you can see what we're doing in a pure code view as well. Let's quickly open this file in a browser so I can show you how mousing around the dropdowns work as you would expect. I'll also do a bit of keyboard navigation so you can see me opening and closing the dropdowns with the Enter key, the space bar, and the Escape keys. Then I'll tab through the dropdowns so you can see that it closes when we're out of the submenu. I'll switch to a mobile breakpoint so you can see the Hamburger menu working, mobile panel dropdowns, and the mobile close button. Now that we have that out of the way, I'm going to close this project and I'll start a new one from scratch. I'm going to start off my project just by clicking the New Project button. I'll select plain HTML and index.html. We're not going to bother with the normalized file here. Then I'm going to save this page. I'll create a new folder called Menu Demo, and I'll say Save. Pinegrow is going to ask me if I want to open that directory, Menu Demo, as a project, and I'll say yes. And we'll see that Pinegrow's added a few files for us just as helpers. If we look at the directory in Windows Explorer, we'll see our index.html, a CSS folder with a single blank style.css file, a PG backup folder, and a PG info folder. This PG backup folder is just something that Pinegrow uses to store backup copies of any files that we've been working on, and PG info stores some information about fonts. This Pinegrow.json file has some project-specific information that Pinegrow saved, but since all of our work is going to be in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we don't need to worry about it so much. I'm going to copy the assets folder from my other project file, since it contains the image and the SVG for our logo. And if we come back to Pinegrow and refresh, reload the project, we'll see that we have the assets folder with images that have our logo, SVG, and PNG file. Inside of Pinegrow, I want to open up the code viewer so that I can see our HTML code, and I'll also open up our style sheet. One of the things that I like to do with my CSS is to break them up into sections so that I can find things later on and so that it stays nice and organized. This is especially important when I'm using Pinegrow because Pinegrow is going to create every new rule right at the bottom of the file. So periodically, I'll want to come back and rearrange some things. So let's go ahead and create some sections. I'll start off by creating one for globals, and this is going to have some variables and things like that. Then I'll create another one for utilities. I'll create another section for layouts. Let's create one for our common menu rules. We'll do one for our main menu rules. And then we'll finish off with our mobile menu rules. And then the last thing I want to do is just create a section for new stuff so that I can categorize it later and it doesn't get mixed in with my mobile menu stuff. Now in my global CSS section, I want to create some variables for colors. So I'll just paste those in from my other file that I created. Now in my global section, I want to create some variables for colors. I'm just going to paste them in so you don't have to watch me type them. And this is just a pretty generic set of color variables. You'll see later on how we create local variables that reference these global variables to do things like setting link colors, hover colors, and more. Let's bring this down. The next thing that I'm going to do is just set a body margin of 0 so that it doesn't add any space around the body of our page. And a lot of the things that I'm adding now you would typically find in a normalized file, but because I wanted to keep this project as clean and simple as possible, we're just adding them in here. The next thing I'm going to do is add a rule that says image and picture elements should have a display of block, a height of auto, max width of 100%, and a width of 100%. We'll create a rule for figure elements, and that's going to have a margin top and bottom of 1em, left and right of 0. We're going to do one for any element that is a button or has a roll of button. That's going to set the cursor to pointer. And this next one is specific to Alpine.js. And it's saying that anything with an xcloak attribute is going to have a display of none. The reason this is here is because Alpine will show and hide things, but it only does that after the JavaScript's loaded. So we don't want things flashing on the screen that shouldn't be there just for JavaScript to come back a millisecond later, load it up, and make it hide. Adding this rule for xcloak hides it right away. Next thing we're going to add are some utilities. So here is a utility that I've got for screen reader text. And this is a pretty generic utility that you can find anywhere on the internet. All it does is hide the text until it has focus, and then it shows it. This is helpful for things like screen reader text and text that we want to have read in screen readers but not visible to users. Next one I'm going to create is a layout contained. And what this is going to do is it's going to let me contain the content on my page and center it. And I've got a max width here set of 80 rems, which is about 120 pixels. And this is because I don't want the content going all the way from one side to the other of the screen. I'm going to add one for layout X padding. And this just adds 2 rems of padding to the left and right. And I usually use this in conjunction with my layout contained so that on smaller breakpoints, the content doesn't butt up right against the edge of the browser. Next, we've got one for drop shadow. And this is going to be helpful for our submenus. And then I have a utility for rotating. And this rotate 90 is going to help with our drop-down icons so that when they're activated, they rotate from pointing right to pointing down. That's all the copy and paste that I'm going to do for now. Let's save this. Now this next part is specific to Pinegrow, and I'm going to set some breakpoints. All this does is make it easy for me to use this drop-down to select different screen sizes in my preview, and it makes it a little bit faster for me to create media queries. If I was making my HTML and CSS by hand, I would just have to remember what my breakpoints are when I write the media queries. So let's add a few right now. We'll do 480 pixels. And this gives me a nice wide range of breakpoints that I can use to test things at different sizes. I'll close this. And now you can see in this drop down, it's already figured out that some of them are going to be extra small, small, medium, large, extra large. And those same definitions are also going to show up here in the visual editor, again, so that I can very quickly and easily create media queries. Just to prove to you that I have nothing up my sleeve, you can see that nothing has really been written to my CSS file. Okay, now let's start putting some stuff on the page. I'm going to bring this down just a little bit to give us more room to see. And we'll switch over to the tree view. And here we'll see that we have our heading elements and then body. And inside the body, I'm going to add a header, a main, and a footer. I want to give this header a class of site-header. So I can do this one of two ways. If I'm going to create a class and some rules for it, I can do it here inside the style panel. Otherwise, I'm just going to use the element properties panel and add a class to it. And all that does when we look at the HTML is it adds the class of site-header. It doesn't actually create any rules inside the CSS file. For the main element, I'm going to give this an ID of main. And then for the footer, I'll create a class called site-footer. And I realized that I added the hashtag there, so I'm just going to get rid of that so that it actually shows up the way that I want it. Okay, there we go. Now let's add a little bit of placeholder content so that this looks a little bit like a page. So here inside my main, I'm just going to do insert. And instead of dragging all these things from the panel over, I'm just going to do this. I'm going to say I want an H1 with the text of page title. And then I want a paragraph that says lorem ipsum. Just grab these, and drag them right in there. I want more lorem ipsum text in this, so I'm going to right click and say insert lorem ipsum text. And I want 4 paragraphs, so I'm going to click 3 to add 3 more and say duplicate. Inside my footer, I want to add a paragraph of text, and this time I am going to just grab one from here and drag it in, because I don't need all the lorem ipsum text. I'm just going to leave this line that says this is a paragraph. Now let's take a look at the large breakpoint, and you see that we're stretched from edge to edge. That's because we haven't done anything to constrain the sections. So to do that, I'm going to insert a div, and I'm going to pop this one inside my header. And on that div, I'm going to say add class, and you can see that it's already pre-populated the classes that we added to our style sheet. So I'm going to add my layout contained and my layout X padding classes. I'm going to make 2 copies of this. And we'll take one and put it in our footer. Put our paragraph inside there. We'll put the other one inside of our main. And we'll grab all this stuff and drop it in there. And you can see how our layout is now constrained. And let's see this one. You can also see that we've got a little bit of padding on either side. Let's take this down to a medium-sized breakpoint again, just so that we can see it a little bit better. The last thing that I'm going to do for all this placeholder data is take my site footer, and I want to add a few rules here because I want my site footer to look a little bit different. So to do that, I'll come over to the style panel, and I already have a class assigned of site footer, so I want to use that. I'm going to click on my 3 dots here to create a new CSS rule, grab that site footer class, and say create inside style.css. And I want to do a background color using my secondary variable. We'll add a text color of white. And we'll give it a little top and bottom padding of 2 rems each. Now the last thing that we do before we start working on the header is we're going to create our skip link. So for that, I'm just going to grab an anchor and drag it into my site header. And I'll just double click that and say skip to content. And then we're going to assign the class of screen reader text to it. And you can see that it's hidden it already. The last thing that we need to do to make this skip link work is we need to give it an anchor target. So I'm just going to come over here. I've got that skip link already selected. And in my element properties, I'm going to give it an href of main. That way, when it's focused and clicked, it goes to my main section. So let's save this. We're going to open it up in a browser to preview it. And now when I tab into it, we can see that it appears. And when I click it, we can see that it's gone to the main ID. So that takes care of all the prep work that we need to do before we start creating the header and the menus. The next thing that we want to do is really plan what this layout's going to be. Here we're looking at a copy of the finished project that we're working on. And you can see on the desktop breakpoint that we have a logo on the left and our menu on the right. And if we switch to a mobile view, the main menu is gone and it's been replaced with a Hamburger menu that has a panel. So if we think about this, we know a few things. We know that on a desktop breakpoint, we want to hide the Hamburger menu. And on a mobile breakpoint, we want to hide the main menu. We also know that our header section is going to have 3 distinct elements. For layouts like this, I like to use CSS Grid because it gives me a lot of flexibility in terms of positioning, sizing, and mobile responsiveness. Let's close out this demo project and we'll start adding the elements. Just to clean up the interface a little bit, I'm going to collapse our main and our footer, and we're going to work primarily inside of this contained area. So let's come back to our insert menu, and I know that I want a div that's going to hold our grid. So again, instead of dragging and dropping a bunch of elements, I'm just going to write some shorthand code and drop the whole block into there. So this div is going to hold our layout grid, and I'm going to give it a class of header_layout grid. Inside of that, I know that I want 3 more things. I'm going to want a wrapper for my logo. Now I could create that as a div, but the more semantically appropriate element would be a figure. So I'm going to say figure logo wrapper. Then I'm going to create a div, and this is going to hold everything related to my mobile menu. So I'll call it header _ mobile menu. And then another div for header main menu. This is just going to give us a bunch of blank divs. So I'm going to add some temporary spans inside of them. And now that I have all this pug shortcode created, I'll drag the whole thing onto our tree. And when we expand it, we can see that it's created the elements for us and that it's assigned the classes that we specified. Before I start creating the rules for this, I want to point out that I tend to work mobile first. So what that means is that my main rules are going to be for the mobile breakpoint, and then I create media queries for anything bigger than that. Now let's come back over to the style panel, and we're going to create a rule for our header layout grid. So I'm going to click on the create new rule button and say header layout grid, create. And this has nothing in it right now, so let's check out the CSS file. We can see that there's nothing in there. And I'm going to use Pinegrove's visual editor to make the CSS grid. So let's just right click on this and say edit CSS grid. I want it to go into my header layout grid rule and say create CSS grid. And while I'm working, you can see everything that I'm doing happen in two different places. You can see it happening in my style panel here on the right, and you can see it happening in the code down here. Let's move this and resize it a little bit so that we can see the preview while we're working. And again, remember, we're going to be working mobile first. So I want to make this grid layout look the way that it's going to work on the mobile view. And if you remember correctly, we had two things there. We had our logo and we had our mobile menu. We were hiding the main menu. I'm going to go ahead and delete this middle grid. And I'm going to change the spacing for this grid from 1FR to auto 1FR. This is going to make it so that my first grid item resizes to fit the content, which is going to be our logo. And then the second grid item expands to fill the rest of the space. I'm also going to change the height from 100 pixels to auto. And I can either type that in or I can double click it and select auto. And what you can see here is that we've got logo, mobile menu, and then below that is the main menu. I want to add a little bit of gap between the columns. So I'm going to say 1 rem of gap between the columns. I don't want it for both columns and row, so we're going to deselect that and just take out our row gap. And then the last thing I'm going to do here is create some named areas. And that's going to make it easier for us to take these divs and target specific areas within the CSS grid. So I'm going to call this named area logo, and I'll call this one mobile menu. Now we'll close out the CSS grid editor. This did a great job on the mobile view, but we also need to take care of the desktop view. So again, one of the reasons that I like using Pinegrove for HTML and CSS is because it makes previewing this stuff so much easier. I don't have to keep switching between them. I can just create another preview window. And now I have one for my desktop view and one for a mobile view. I'll come back to my layout grid. And before I create the media query for that, I'm noticing that I forgot to organize my CSS a little bit. So I'm going to take this site footer and just pop that here in the layout section. Because as I said, each time we create a new rule, it adds it to the bottom in the CSS file. All right, so the next thing I want to do is create the media query for my layout grid. And to do that, I do create new rule. I've got my header layout grid, and now I'm going to say media query, 768 pixels and above. And we can see that it's created the outline of that media query. Here, Pinegrove tries to be a little bit smart. And if you notice in our preview windows, we've got this little paintbrush icon. This lets us choose which breakpoint we're actively working on when we create CSS rules. So if I stayed in my mobile breakpoint, it wouldn't know that we were able to create things inside of a desktop breakpoint. So I'm going to come over and do my desktop breakpoint, and suddenly we can see the rule for it in the style panel. And when I go to edit CSS grid, instead of the regular header layout grid, I can choose the one with the media query. And here we're just going to create CSS grid. And I'm going to do a similar thing where I want our logo to be auto-sized, and I want the grid area for our main menu to be auto-sized. And then I want the grid area in the middle to fill up the remaining space. I'll also take our height and make that auto, and I'll give it a row and column gap of 1 rem. And if you've been paying attention, it's created these rules right here inside the media query, and it's also showing us which ones it's overriding. Now the last thing I'll do here is create those named areas again. I'll create one for logo, mobile menu, and main menu. We'll close this, and you can see that we're getting somewhere. The last thing that I want to do is take all these items that are in here and just align them center. So I'll come over to my CSS grid. We'll say align items center. That makes it look a little bit nicer. Now I could leave this as is because I have each of these divs in the right order, but one of the reasons why I named those grid template areas is so that I could specifically tell each of these things where I want it to live. That means regardless of the order of these, I can put them wherever I want. And to do that, I just right click on the div, go to CSS grid, and I say, this one I want to be on the logo, this one I want on the mobile menu, and this one I want on the main menu. You'll see that it's done a few things here, and one of them is something that I did not want. Because I didn't specify where it was going to write those properties, it wrote it to my figure rule for my logo area, and it wrote them as inline styles for the others. Let's go ahead and correct it here, because I want this to live on my logo wrapper. So I'm just going to change this to say grid area is logo, and remove it from that one. And for these others, I can click on the plus button here to save those inline styles as a proper CSS rule. And I say that I want to save it to my header mobile menu on this one, and my header main menu on this one. And as we look down here, we can see that it created the CSS for us. Now the next thing that we're going to do is to show and hide the elements depending on the breakpoint. And again, if you remember correctly, on the mobile view, we want to hide the main menu. So all we're going to do is set our main menu display to none, which hides it very nicely. And then for the mobile menu, we have to make sure that our rule is selected. For anything 768 pixels and up, I want to create a rule that does the same thing of setting display to none. Whoops, I put that in the wrong place. Let's get rid of that. In my media query, I want to set the display to none. And for the main menu, at 768 and above, I want to create a rule. Make sure that we're looking at the right place over here. That sets the display to flex. And while I'm thinking about it, I'm going to turn off this feature that says sync with page views. And all that does is make it so that whatever breakpoint I'm in over here synchronizes with the style window. That's not necessarily what I want. Let's wrap up the styling for these divs, and then we'll work on the contents. So we'll come back over here to our mobile menu, and we can see right now this is pushed to the left, and I actually want this to be all the way on the right. So I just make sure that I have my mobile menu rule selected, and I can come over here to my flex box and justify content end, and make sure that this is display flex. And again, we see this rule crossed out, and that's because I have my little paintbrush icon on the desktop breakpoint. If I was looking at it from the mobile breakpoint, it would show correctly. Now I'll come to the desktop breakpoint, and we'll check out our main menu rules. And here I want to center align my items and justify them flex end. I could put all that inside the media query, but I'd rather put it inside the main rule and then have the media query just change this from display none to display flex. So we'll align center, and we'll justify flex end. The next piece that we're going to work on is creating the logo for the header. And we're going to do that here inside the figure element. And just so we can see what we're working on a little bit better, I'm going to get rid of that so that we're only looking at things on our desktop breakpoint. If you look over here, we have these funny numbers that are covering up the placeholder logo text. This is telling us the CSS grid boundaries for this element. And we set those boundaries by giving the grid area of logo. I'm just going to turn these off so that we can see things a little bit better for right now. Although I am going to turn them back on later because I like working with them. So for this logo, I want to use source set, which means that I'm going to use a picture element with a source element and an image element inside of it. And I want that to be wrapped in an anchor. So I'll come back here to insert. We're going to clear out that code. And here I'm just going to create an anchor element. And inside of that, I'm going to have a picture. And then I'll have a source and an image. And then on the same level as my picture element, I'm going to have a span, and this is going to be my screen reader text, and I'm just going to have it say homepage link. Let's grab all that and drop it in there. Now I can get rid of this placeholder span, make that go away. For the anchor element, I'll come back to my properties and just give that something in the href. And actually, while I'm doing this, let's take a look at the code. We'll expand this out. You can see that it's automatically created a placeholder image for us. I don't want to use that. So I'm just going to come in and grab the logo asset that we made earlier. Perfect. And this is the ping file. I'll take my source element, and for source set here, I'm going to grab my SVG. Great. So now that means that it's going to use the SVG by default. And for some reason, if it can't render that, it'll render the ping. And then on my homepage link, I'm going to give that a class of screen reader text. The other thing I need to do here is to set the size of this logo. So I'm going to do that on my figure element. I'll come back over to style. I already have my header logo wrapper rule, and I'm going to tell it that I want a width of 16 rems. So that's about 256 pixels. I also want to unset any margins that are around there. So I'll just come over and set a margin of 0 all around. Now, one of the things that you'll see is as soon as I took that margin out, it took this whole header section and made it butt right up to the top of the screen. That's probably not something that I want. So I'm going to add a little padding top and bottom to my layout grid element. So I'll just select it and come back here and say 1 rem on the top and 1 rem on the bottom. And that gives us a little bit of breathing room. Now I procrastinated enough, it's time to actually get to work on the main menu. Let's collapse this figure and the mobile menu because we're going to focus all of our attention now on our main menu. Coming back to our sample again, we can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 top level items, where items 2 and 3 have submenus. And if you remember from our example navigation menu with top level links pattern, this is going to have a nav with an ARIA label, then an unordered list inside of it. Inside that unordered list, we'll have list item with an anchor. And then for any that have submenus, it'll also have a button that controls the submenu, and it'll have a nested unordered list. So let's take this one thing at a time. Come back to insert, and I want to start by adding a nav element. And I want to give this an ARIA label of main menu. So to do that, I come over to my element properties, add attribute, main menu. While I'm here, I'm going to add a class because I know that I'm going to target rules specifically to this main menu. So I'll just add the class main menu _nav. Now let's create the basic structure for the list. So I'll start with an unordered list, and I'm going to give this a class of main menu list. Underneath that, I'm going to have a list item, and inside of that, I'm going to have an anchor with the text of item 1. Let's grab this whole thing and drag it in there. Now that I've got some content in, I can get rid of my placeholder span that said main menu. And we'll expand this so that we can see what's happening. All right, so we have our unordered list, a list item, and then an anchor with item 1. Let's give this anchor an href just so that it turns it into a link. Now I know that I wanted 4 top level items. So again, I'm going to come back to my main list item here, and I want to duplicate this 3 times. So I'll hit the number 3 and duplicate, and then I'll just change the text in here. Now, of course, we don't want this looking like a bulleted list, so let's do a little bit of work on that. Before I do that though, let's come into our style file because we have all these rules that need to be organized. We've got all these things related to the header. I'm just going to grab these guys and I'm going to move them to my layouts section. And while I'm at it, I'm going to clean up this indentation because it's going to bother me otherwise. Now to make these unordered lists behave a little bit more like a menu, there's 2 rules that we want to add to it. We want to add a rule to the unordered list, taking away any padding and margin. And then we want to add a rule to the list items, making it a list item type of none. And I know that these rules are going to apply to both the mobile menu and the main menu. So when I create the rules, I'm going to target the site header, not the specific main menu or mobile menu. So I'll come back to my style panel and we're going to create a rule. Let's select our unordered list and we're going to create a rule. And this is going to be for a site header, unordered list that's inside of a nav. And we can see in the preview window that it's highlighting what we're targeting. We can also see in the selector window, the selector that it's going to write for us. So let's say create, And here we're just going to set our padding to 0 and our margin to 0. Next, we'll do the same thing for our list item. Site header, list item, inside of a nav. And for that, we're going to come over to list type, set that to none. And then the last common rule that we're going to create is for the anchors, because I don't want them to be underlined. So again, site header, anchor, and that's going to be site header, nav, unordered list, list item, anchor. Create that. And we're going to say decoration is none. Let's take these three rules and we're going to put them under common menu. Now the rest of the main menu rules that we create, we're going to do as children of the header main menu. And do you remember at the very beginning of this video when we started working on the CSS, I showed you these root variables for colors? This is where they come into play. Because I want to make this menu something that we can easily reuse over and over again. I'm going to take these global variables and reference them inside of local variables. So to do that, let's come on down here to my main menu. And again, rather than you watching me type, I'm just going to copy and paste where I've created these variables for things like the main menu link, or hover link, or item background, hover background, borders, submenu background, etc., etc. And each of those is referencing back to the global variables. And we can very easily assign these generic colors to more specific variables. So now that I've done that, let's start making this thing look like a real menu. To start it off, we're going to take our unordered list and we're going to give it a style of flex and a flex direction of column. So let's create a rule for that. I've got my main menu list, create the rule, display, flex, flex direction of row. And I apologize, I misspoke before. The flex direction is going to be row, not column. I want to set a little bit of gap between each of these items. So I'll just do 0.125 rems between them. And I also want to set a flex wrap of wrap. That way, if we have a menu that's too long, it wraps to the next line. Next, we'll come down to our list item. And here I know that I may want to set a different background color for hover, and I want the list item to be underlined when it's hovered. So since I'm looking at the normal state right now, we're going to create a rule that sets the background color to our unhovered background color, and we're going to create a bottom border with no color at all. So let's create the rule. This is going to be main menu list, direct child of list item, create it. I'm going to set my background color to color main menu item background. And right now, if we look on that, it's set to white. I could very easily just come in here and say unset, since I don't want an item background color. I also want to take advantage of some cascading and set the text color for our anchor. So I'll do that by using our color main menu link. And you'll see that it hasn't changed yet, but we'll get to that in a second. And the last thing I want to do here is set our bottom border to 2 pixels. CSS variable. Oh, I don't want to use a CSS variable here. I'm actually going to click on this and just make it transparent and set the type to solid. So now we have a solid 2 pixel transparent bottom border. And what this is going to do is it's going to make it so that when we hover, we don't get the item jiggling up and down. Since it already has a 2 pixel bottom border there, it stays in the same place. It just changes the color of it from transparent to something else. And now the last thing that I'm going to do is create a rule for the anchor. And I'm going to do main menu list, list item, anchor, create. And the first thing I want to do is add a little bit of padding around this. So we're going to do a padding of 0.75 rems on the top and the bottom, and 1.75 on the left and right. That gives us some space. And I'm going to turn this back on so that we can see what's happening. And this gives us nice big click targets. The other thing that I want to do is set the color of this to inherit from my list item. So I'll come back here to color and set that to inherit. Now you're probably asking why I set the color on the list item and not the anchor itself. And the reason is because in a few more steps, I'm going to add an SVG underneath that list item. And I want to make sure that the SVG and the anchor text both get the same color. So by putting the color on the list item, I can take advantage of the inheritance. I don't need to worry about adding it in two different places. And just to show you that I'm not completely full of it, let's go ahead and change the variable up here. So I've got my main menu link, and I'm going to change this from our dark variable to purple. And there you have it. Before we start working on the submenus, I do want to add a few hover styles. So we're going to start with the hover style on my list item, because like I mentioned before, when we hover over this, I want to show a border on the bottom. So I just select a list item, and now I'm going to select our hover, and I'll create a rule for our main menu list item in that hover state. And here I want to change my background color. So let's right click on that, and we're going to do our item background hover, which is kind of an off-white. It's our light color. Our text color is going to change to our text hover variable. And then we're going to create a border. So again, we'll do that 2 pixels, solid. And here I'm going to use my main menu item border hover. And this actually appears to be an unfixed bug inside of PineGrow, where when I use variables on the color and borders, it does things that I don't expect it to. So let's just grab this directly from the CSS. In there, that looks better. Let's get rid of the toggle visual helpers so that we can see what's happening. Great. So now let's get rid of that so that we can see as I hover over them, it changes the background and it adds a bottom border. I want to take this hover rule and just move it right below the main rule so that it's easier to find later. Now I'm also noticing that my top and bottom padding doesn't look very good here on my list item. So let's come in and take a look at what might be causing that. The reason for that is because we need to set this to a display of flex, so that now it uses the padding correctly the way we want it to. All right, let's take these rules that we just created and we will move them underneath our main menu area. And I'm going to copy this section divider and create a new one for main menu, submenu, because there's going to be quite a few rules that we need to create there as well. We'll save this and get to work on that next. In this next step, we're going to create the drop-down menu items. And as you can see in our reference project, we've got a few things happening. For one, next to the top level items with drop-downs, we've got this little icon. And this icon is going to serve as the button and the trigger for the drop-down. If I hover over the item itself, the anchor on the item, this works as a link. So we've got two different things here that are going to make the drop-down open, but if I click on the button, it makes the drop-down open and close. If I click on the link, it's going to follow the link. And then of course, we have another unordered list that acts as the container with the list items and the anchors below it. So back in our project, you can see we have our item 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we want these two list items to have drop-downs. So for both of these, I'm going to add a class called hasDropDown. This is going to let us create rules that are specific to list items that have drop-downs. Now, inside of one of these list items, we need to have the anchor for the top level, we need to have a button, and we need to have another unordered list. So let's go ahead and grab a button, and I'll pop that right after our link. And now we'll create the unordered list for the submenu. And again, I could grab these elements from in here if I wanted to, but honestly, creating them through insert code is just so much easier. Now for this unordered list, I want to give it a class of submenu because I know that I'm also going to create other rules for any items that only belong to submenus. Then inside of this, I'll create a list item and an anchor, and I'll call this submenu 1. And I'll do another one, call it submenu 2. And again, I need to give these guys href targets, so I'll do that right here. and we've got our basic structure in place. Now you can see in the preview that this definitely is not ideal. We actually want the top level link and the button to be on one line, and then below that we want our submenu. So I'm going to create a div that holds the anchor and the button together. Let's just insert div, grab our anchor and a button, and drag them inside of there. Now I want to create a rule for that div, turning this into a flex box. So we'll come back here, and here we're going to say header main menu, because we only want this to apply on our main menu header. We don't want it to apply for both. Has dropdown, and we want it to be the child of has dropdown, the child div of has dropdown. We'll create, and we'll set the display to flex, flex direction to row, and line items center. And right away I can see that I made a little bit of a mistake with a previous rule, because you can see that our top level item now has an underline. And that's because for our links, when we've removed the underline, I said that the anchor has to be a direct descendant of a list item. So let's fix that mistake right now. And I'm just going to say, boom, there. And we'll do the same thing for this one. And now it'll apply to any anchors that are inside of a list item. Now let's go ahead and turn this button into something a little bit more usable. So we'll select that element. And instead of saying click me, I want to add an SVG inside of it. So here I'm just going to insert, and I want to see our SVG icons. I'm going to grab a remix icon, and I'm going to use arrow drop right fill. And I'm just going to grab this guy and drop him right inside of there. And you can see in the HTML, it just drops the SVG code right in. Now that I've done that, let's get rid of my click me text for the button, because that's not really necessary. While I'm at it, let's make sure that the properties for this SVG are the way that I want them. So right now they're set to 1M, and that all looks good. So let's create a rule for this button to make it a little bit more usable. Come over to style. And for this, we want it to be any button that is a child of main menu list has dropdown button. And here I want to do several things. First of all, I want to get rid of this god-awful background color. So we're just going to come here to color and say unset. I'm going to add a manual rule, and instead of using the visual creator all the time, and especially since some of the things may not be in here, I can always just click on this little plus button and say border equals 0. This is just a border shorthand that Pinegrow hasn't implemented. And now I really need to do something about this padding. So let's come back to padding. And here for the top and the bottom, I want the padding to be the same as for my anchor. So 0.75 rems. And then if you remember correctly, our anchors have 1.75 rems of padding on either side of them. So I'm going to do a little bit of math, because I want to put a little bit of padding on the anchor, and then to the left of the button, and then to the right of the button. So since I needed to add up to 1.75, I'm going to do 1.25 to the right, and 0.25 to the left. And then on my anchor that has a submenu, I'm going to change that padding as well. So here I'm going to say header main menu, has dropdown, direct child div, and anchor. And here I'm just going to change my padding right to 0.25 rems. And now they start to look a little bit more even. It's still not going to look right because we have our submenu items pushing this out, but we're going to get to that in a minute. And you also notice that the drop-down icon is not inheriting the color from the list item. And that's because we need to tell the button that we want the color to inherit. And now it does. And I also realized as I was going through this that I really should not have called this has dropdown. It should be has submenu. I'm not sure what I was thinking there. So let's just do a quick copy and paste and replace. We've done that in the style. And we'll do the same thing here in my HTML. There we go, that's better. Now it's got the right classes. I apologize for that. The last thing that we want to do for this button is to change it from a block level item to an inline flex. All right, now let's tackle the submenu itself. So we'll come to our submenu unordered list. And the first thing that I want to do is give this just a tiny bit of a drop shadow. If you remember correctly, we had a utility class that we created for drop shadow. So I'm just going to select it right here. Now let's take all these rules that we've been working on so far, and we're going to just move them up to my main menu submenu section to get them out of the way so that we can focus our new rules just on the submenu panel. So here we're going to create a new one, and this is going to be my header main menu, submenu, create that rule. I'm going to set a background color to my submenu background variable. And now you can see that we've got a nice gray with a tiny drop shadow going on there. I want to set my display to flex and my direction to column. And I want to set this as a position absolute so that it does not mess with the sizing of the parent element. So position absolute. And while I'm at it, we're going to set the z-index to 999 because I want it to come above anything else that happens to be on the page. I also want to make sure that this thing's positioned correctly. So we're going to do top of 0 and left of 0. And you can see that it put it at the top of our page because our parent li does not have a position relative yet. So let's come back to the rule for that. And I want to target my main menu list li and set position relative. That got us one step closer. It moved our drop-down panel directly over that. So now let's come back to that rule. And instead of top 0, I'm going to do top 105%. And we can play with this number, whatever we want it to be. A lot of it's going to depend really on what we've done with spacing and padding. But I want to make sure that it comes just below the underline that we've created. And I want to make sure that the left lines up with the left of the parent. You'll also notice now that we've done all of that we have the text wrapping inside of the unordered list, which isn't necessarily what we want. So let's come on down to the list item that is a child of our submenu. We're going to create a new rule for it. And for that, we'll say header main menu, submenu with the direct child of list item. Create. And here I'm going to create the property of white space no wrap. Before you've seen me do it by clicking on the plus button, you've seen me use the visual editor. This time I'm going to use the pop-up code editor. We'll just do white space, no wrap. And that lets us extend beyond. While we're here, let's set a few color variables. So I will set my background color to the submenu item background color and my text color to my submenu item text. And then because I'm going to want these things to change for hover states, I'm just going to copy this whole thing and we're going to add hover. I don't need the white space no wrap anymore, but I'll change these to be my hover variables so that now they do what I want them to. Let's come into our submenu anchor. And we can already see that it's inheriting the color from our list item. So we don't need to set anything else there. The last thing that I'm going to do is take this submenu and I'm going to add my xcloak attribute. Again, remembering that xcloak is something that we added a CSS rule for earlier, and it's something that Alpine.js can use to show and hide elements. So I'm just going to add this attribute so that we don't have to see this anymore. So say add attribute. And it really doesn't matter that we haven't loaded up Alpine.js yet, because at this point, we're just talking about a CSS rule. All right, rather than duplicating all that effort again, let's just take our item 3, delete it, and we're going to duplicate our item 2 and change the text, because I really am that lazy. And this gives us all the styling that we need for the main menu. The next piece that we're going to work on is the mobile menu trigger. So before we start on that, let's come into our style sheet and get organized a little bit. And I'll just grab all of these things related to our submenu. and drop them into the submenu section. And then, just like we did with the main menu, where we added the variables for our colors, we're going to do the same thing here for the mobile menu. And once again, rather than you watch me type painfully, I'm just going to copy and paste. And here we've got variables for the button background, the lines of the button, the mobile menu panel, the text of the mobile menu, and the hover text of the mobile menu. It doesn't need to be nearly as extensive as it was for the main menu, because the styling is going to be a whole lot simpler. Hopefully that also means that the section of this video is going to be a whole lot quicker. And also, since we're no longer working with the desktop menu, we're just going to change our view here so that we're looking at a smaller breakpoint. Now let's collapse some of these things on the sidebar and get cracking. Before we do that though, let's figure out exactly what it is that we're building. And for that, we'll come back to our preview project. So the first thing we're doing here is we've got our hamburger menu. When we click on it, it's going to change from the hamburger to an X. And then we're going to see a mobile panel pop up with everything behind it dimmed a little bit. On this pop-up, I can close it using the X button there, or I can close it by clicking outside of the mobile panel. We also have another copy of our logo in the mobile panel, and then we have our menu with items 1, 2, 3, and 4, and drop-downs. And those drop-downs are simply going to expand. When I click this, I do want you to see something though, and that's that the target for the drop-down extends all the way to the end of the mobile panel. We want somebody to be able to have a nice big target to click on. And again, each of these items, whether they're top-level menu items or submenu items, is a link. Looking at the div that holds our mobile menu, there's two things that we're going to want. We're going to want a button to trigger the mobile menu, and then we're going to want a wrapper for the mobile menu panel. Let's start with creating that button. So I'm just going to come to Insert, and you can see that I've got a button here in my recently used. I'm just going to drag and drop that right in. I want to give this a class of mobile menu trigger and then add some rules to it. So let's do that right now. And we'll do this in one step by saying .mobile menu trigger, and it's created the rule and applied it to the element. And here I want to set the display a block. I want to set my padding top and bottom to 0.5 rems, left and right to 0.75 rems. I want to set a background color using my variable of mobile menu button background. And then for the border, I want to set a border radius all the way around of 4 pixels. And we'll do that right there all the way around. And the border itself is going to be 1 pixel, solid. And I'm going to set that to black for right now. And then we're going to change that to a variable in the CSS code. And I'm just going to use this color mobile menu button lines. And if I turn off my visual helpers, we can see that that is starting to look pretty good. I do want to come over to the element properties again, and we want to set an ARIA label on this of mobile menu trigger. And we want to set a button type of button. As a matter of fact, because I forgot to do that in some of the other ones for the main menu, let's take care of some of those ARIA attributes now. So we'll just come in to both buttons, select them both, and we'll set the type to button, and the ARIA label is going to say expand submenu controls attribute. Let's also go ahead and add the ARIA expanded equals false while we're at it. And we'll do the same to our mobile button. Once we start using Alpine.js to make these do things, then I'll add the ARIA controls attributes. All right, now that we're done with that little detour, inside this button, we want to add 3 spans, and each of those spans is going to have a bottom border on it. And that's what's going to make up the lines for the hamburger menu. So let's add those now. I'm just going to grab 1 span, and we'll start styling it. I'm going to give it a class of mobile menu _ trigger lines. And for that, we're going to set the display to block. I'm going to get rid of this text that says this is a span. We don't want any of that garbage. I'll set the width to 1.5 rems. For border, we want to set a border bottom of 2 pixels. solid. And for right now, I'll do black. And then I'll copy over our variable for the button lines. Again, this is because Pinegrow has a really hard time with variables for borders for some reason, not sure why. And you can see that we've started creating the hamburger button. And the last thing that I want to do on this is to come back and set the margin, top and bottom to 0.25 rems, left and right to 0. And with that done, we're going to duplicate this span 2 more times. So I'll hit the number 2 and click on the duplicate button. And that gives me my 3 lines. Then I'm going to come in and get rid of this click me, and we're looking pretty good. The last thing I want to do inside of the button is add some screen reader text that says open mobile menu. So we'll do that by adding a span. And for that span, we will just say open mobile menu. And then I'm going to add my screen reader text class to it. Let's collapse that button. And now we'll get to work on the mobile panel. So again, if you remember correctly, that mobile panel is actually going to have 2 components. One component is going to be a background that darkens the background of the page and gives me a target to click on when I'm outside of the mobile panel to close it. The other element is going to be the panel itself. So for that, we're going to create a div, and I'm going to call this mobile menu wrapper. And inside of that, I'm going to create another div called mobile menu background, and yet another one called mobile menu panel. Let's grab all of this and put it right next to our trigger. Now let's expand this, and we'll get to work on the mobile menu panel. For this, I'm going to create a rule called mobile menu panel. Let's set a background color on this so that we can see what it is. So I'm going to use my variable mobile menu panel background. And then I want to set a position of this to fixed, because I want this to always be on the same place on the screen no matter what. And I'm going to set my position top to 0, bottom to 0, left to 0. I want to set a width of 80%. And you can start to see this taking shape now. While I'm thinking about it, let's give this a little drop shadow. I want to give it half a rem of padding all the way around. I want to give this a z-index of 999 to make sure that it goes above pretty much everything else. And then I want to do display of flexed and flex direction of column. Now let's come over here to the background div, and this is what's going to darken the background and give us that click target. So we'll create another rule for a mobile menu background. And here we're going to call it width 100% because we want it to go all the way across. Our background color, I probably could have used a variable, but I just want this to be a little bit darkened. Again, we're going to do a position of fixed. I do want to give this a little bit of a z-index because I want it to be above the content, but I want it to be below the panel. So I'm going to give this a z-index of 998. I already set a width, but I want to set a height of 100%. And then I need to tell it the position top 0, left 0. Now inside the panel, the first element that we're going to create is going to be our close button. So let's insert another button. And for our element properties, we're going to add some attributes. So we're going to add a button type of button, ARIA label of mobile menu close. ARIA expanded is going to be false. And yes, I know it's expanded right now, but once we have everything together, the default state is going to be closed. And then inside of this button, we're going to get rid of the click me text. And it looks like Camtasia decided that was going to be a great time to crash my computer for me. So now that I have everything restarted again, let's go ahead and add the SVG to our button. So insert, SVG icons, close, drop him right in there. And now let's style this button. So we'll give this a class of mobile menu close. And we'll position this absolute. And we'll come half a rem from the top, half a rem from the right. And we'll do a display of flex. And give it half a rem of padding all the way around. A border radius of 4 pixels all the way around. I want the color on this to use the same as the hamburger menu. So I will set this to be the mobile menu button lines color. If I really wanted to, I could have created a separate variable, but I generally want them to be the same. And then let's set a border on this all the way around of 1 pixel, solid. And again, we will copy in the variable for my button lines. And I also need to set the background to transparent. Looking at this, I think I want the icon to be a little bit bigger. So let's just come in and change the properties here. Let's set the width and height to 1.5 ems. All right, now let's close that up. And the next thing that we're going to do is create a nav element to hold the mobile menu. Let's come back here and we'll grab a nav element. And I want to give this an ARIA label of mobile menu. And we'll give it a class of mobile menu nav. And inside of it, if you remember correctly, we're going to have a copy of our logo as well as the menu. So rather than go through the effort of creating that all over again, let's just copy and paste what we've already used. So I'll grab our header logo wrapper and pop it inside there. And then we'll grab the unordered list from our main menu and drop it inside there. We'll need to make a few changes, but that's not going to be hard at all. So we'll start with our logo wrapper. And instead of calling it header logo wrapper, I'm going to call it mobile menu logo wrapper. And let's create some rules for it. So for that, we're going to give it a width of 12 rems. And then we'll set our margin here to 0 on the top, 0 on the right, 1 rem on the bottom, and 0 on the left. For our menu, we're going to change the class from main menu list to mobile menu list. We can already see that it's picked up on some of the styling because we don't have the dots and we don't have any padding or margin. Those are all things that we created in the global menu list styling. So let's come in here to our style.css. And before I start making even more rules, we'll just take a moment to do a little cleanup. And everything here looks good. That's all mobile menu related. So I'm just going to grab it right there. And you know what? Let's just put this background before the panel for no other reason than that's how it shows up in the HTML. And I just want to make it easier to find later. All right, so coming down here, let's create a rule for our unordered list for the mobile menu. So we're just going to say mobile menu list. And here I want to do a display of flex direction of column. Coming down to our list item, we'll create a rule for it. We're going to select mobile menu list and list item, because again, we want this to apply both to our top level items as well as our submenu items. So we'll say create. And as a matter of fact, let's go ahead and take our unordered lists and our submenus, and we're going to remove our X cloaks from those so that we can see just what the heck we're doing. So for those mobile menu list items, again, we want to set a display of flex direction of column. And just like we did on the main menu, we want to set the color to a variable that's going to filter down. So there, we're going to set that to our mobile menu text color. On the anchors, we're going to do a similar thing. So we'll create this rule, mobile menu list anchor, because again, we want it to apply to all the anchors, whether they're in the top level or a sub level. And once again, display of flex, color inherit, and let's set some padding on this, 0.75 rems on the top, 0.75 rems on the bottom, 1 rem on the right, and 0 on the left. You can definitely see that we have some work to do here with the buttons and with the submenus, so let's take care of it. So for that, we want to target the div inside of it that holds the anchor and the button. And here we're going to say mobile menu list has submenu direct child of div. And we'll do a display of flex. And this time a direction of row. We're also going to align items center. And then on those buttons, mobile menu list, button. I'm going to set a display of inline flex. We'll do a background color of transparent. I want to do a border of 0. And then as you can see, this does not grow all the way to the end. So we'll just come back over to our flex properties and say flex grow 1, and that lets it extend all the way out. Let's distinguish a little bit between our top level menu items and our submenu items. So here we're going to grab a submenu, mobile menu list, submenu. And for this, we're going to do a display of block. The reason for that is because I want, when we open this up, I want it to push everything else down. And the other thing I want to do is just indent this a tiny bit. So we'll create some padding on here, 0 on the top and bottom, and we'll do 1 rem on the left and the right. And as I'm looking at it, I'm not a huge fan of these SVGs. So let's replace those. I'll just come in here, SVG icons, and I'm going to do arrow right line. So we'll do actions and say replace. And I'll do the same thing down here. Only other thing that I want to do is just add a little bit of a hover color to these. So we'll come back to a list item. And we've got our mobile menu list item. Let's click on this in our style. And we're going to create a new rule. Mobile menu list, list item, hover. And for that, I want to change the text color to mobile menu text hover. And while we're at it, let's organize this. And let's see, when I hover over, it does not change our SVG. So let's do that on the button. We just need to set inherit. Come in here and say color, inherit, and now it does. Let's add our X cloaks back on our submenus before we forget. And we'll add the X cloak on our mobile menu wrapper. And that takes care of all of our styling. Now that we have the menu elements created and styled, let's go ahead and start making them do something. Rather than creating all the JavaScript from scratch, I'm going to use Alpine.js. It's a great lightweight JavaScript framework and it's super simple to use. To get started, just go to alpine.js.dev and hit the docs section. And for this menu, we want a little bit more than just the core Alpine components. We actually want to be able to use the core components and the focus plugin. So go over to the focus plugin page, scroll down a tiny bit, and we get the code that we just need to copy and paste into our site. So I'll just grab this from here, flip back over to my page. And here I'm going to go all the way down to my footer, and I'm just going to put it right before the end of my footer. Now keep in mind that this is going to grab the JavaScript from the CDN. So when you're putting this in production, you might want to copy this down locally. That's just one more step in this process that's not absolutely necessary. So I'm going to use it from the CDN right now. If you're wondering why I'm using this focus plugin, it's mainly for keyboard navigation support. I'd say about 90% of what we're doing works just fine with the core Alpine, but certain things like tabbing out of the submenu don't work correctly without the focus plugin. I certainly don't want to stretch out this video anymore by turning this into an Alpine tutorial. So I'm going to do a lot of copying and pasting of code and explain to you the concepts of what I'm doing. If you want the code, you can go to my GitHub page and grab it from there. So the first part that I'm going to work on is going to be our mobile panel. So let's come over to our tree view, and I'm going to select my header mobile menu div. This is where I'm going to put my xData attribute that tells Alpine what to do. So what this is saying is that we're going to start off with our mobile menu open set to false, and we're going to listen for any time that the escape key is used, and we're going to set is open to false. On our button, we already have some of this stuff done. So we've got our type set to button. We've got our ARIA expanded set to false. We have our ARIA label set to mobile menu trigger. But what we don't have is an ARIA controls. So we want to put an attribute on there saying what this button controls. And in order to do that, we need to put an ID on the thing that it's going to control. So let's start by doing that. And we're going to put that ID on the mobile panel. So we'll just come over here to mobile panel, and I'm going to slap that right there in my ID section. And now I can come back to my button and I can say ARIA controls mobile panel. And also inside that button code, we're going to add an X on click mobile menu open equals not mobile menu open. And what that's going to do is it's going to toggle our mobile menu from open to closed. And it's also going to set ARIA expanded to true when mobile menu is open. Coming back to the panel, we're going to set our X show to mobile menu open. So that means that when this button's clicked, it's going to set it to mobile menu open, and then it's going to show the panel. One thing you might notice especially if you're looking at the Alpine documentation, is that instead of writing X on, they'll use an @ symbol. Either way is fine, but I'm using X on because the @ symbol doesn't work well when I create WordPress blocks from this. So again, because I want to be able to use this in a number of settings, I'm foregoing the shorthand and just writing X on the long way. The last thing that we need to do here is to put the action on our mobile menu wrapper to make this whole thing show and hide when I click on the button. So I already had my X cloak set, and that's what hides it right away. Now I'm going to do an X on, so that on click, mobile menu open equals not mobile menu open, and X show equals mobile menu open. And now, clicking is making it open and close. And actually, when we look at it, it doesn't matter where I click, it's opening and closing. So I think I may have put that on the wrong place, and I did. I actually meant for this to go on my mobile menu background, because I want to set it so that when I click this open, I can click anywhere else on the page, but if I click on the background, it closes. So there we go. I can click anywhere I want inside the panel. Everything's fine. I haven't assigned anything to my close button yet, but as soon as I click on something on this background div, it goes away. Now let's take a look at our close button. And we've got type of button, ARIA label is mobile menu close, ARIA expanded equals false. And just like we did on the Hamburger button, I want to set ARIA controls equals mobile panel. And then I'll do the same thing on this button to tell it when I click on it to set mobile menu to closed and to set my ARIA expanded attribute to whatever it is, whether it's true or false. Let's test it out. I can click anywhere here in the panel. Clicking on the button closes it. Clicking on the background closes it. Before we get into changing the lines on the Hamburger menu, let's just test this out in the browser and make sure that all of our attributes are working correctly. So we have our Hamburger button with our ARIA label. Type is button, ARIA expanded equals false. Let's click on it. And we can see that it changed ARIA expanded equals true. My ARIA controls equals mobile panel. And here we can see that I have a div with an ID of mobile panel. While I have this open, let's go ahead and click on the background. And again, that sets it to false. We'll open it up one more time. And now we'll close it with this button. And as a matter of fact, let's take a look at the button right now. And Alpine has already set our ARIA expanded equals true. So let's click on it. Actually, let's click on somewhere else. There we go. Doesn't do anything. I'll click on this. It sets my ARIA expanded to false, and it closes the panel. So that was all pretty easy. Let's go ahead and style it up just a tiny bit by making these Hamburger lines do something. And for that, we're going to use a little bit of CSS and a little bit of JavaScript. So let's come back here into our style.css. And look, I never cleaned up after my mobile menu. I'll come back to that in a second. Because what I want to find are my lines. There we go. And once again, I'm going to copy and paste some stuff in because you don't need to watch me type it. But I have these three classes that we're going to use Alpine.js to assign to the lines when they're clicked. And what it's going to do is it's going to take the top line and the bottom line and make an X out of it. And the middle line, it's going to hide. So let's come into our index file. And actually something that I should have done on each of these before is create ARIA hidden equals true, because these really are just decorative. So let's apply that to each of these as well. Now I'm going to come line by line and just add a tiny bit of Alpine magic. This one I'm going to say that when my button has been clicked, I'm going to add the class mobile trigger line 1. On the middle one, I'll do line 2. And on the third one, it's going to get line 3. So now when I click on this guy, you can see that it turns into an X. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to manage our dropdowns. Once again, I have a reference project up here because I want to demonstrate what the behavior of these dropdowns is going to be. Notice over in the developer tools that I have my button selected and ARIA expanded is false. When I hover over it, it turns to true and my dropdown shows. Also, when I use the keyboard, you see a few things happen. I tab between top level items, and when I hit this one, it lets me activate the link. And then I tab over to a button. Hitting enter activates the button, changes my ARIA expanded to true and opens the submenu. Enter again closes it. Same thing with space, it opens it, it closes it. And when it's open, I can press the escape key to close it, whether I'm still on the button or I'm inside the submenu. Additionally, we've got an ARIA controls that relates to the ID of my unordered list, main menu, submenu 1. So this ID is going to get automatically populated by Alpine.js, and the ARIA controls need to be populated up here. And again, on the keyboard, when I tab out of this thing, I need to make sure that it closes. So let's see how we handle all of that inside of our project. For this, I'm going to start with the desktop version, and then we'll move on to the mobile menu. So let's switch over to medium breakpoint so that we can see everything again. And it looks like I do not have my X cloaks set up on my drop downs, so let's do that. Oh, I do have them set. Yeah, there we go. I just needed to refresh for some reason. And here we want to start everything on my first LI has submenu. So let's close some of these other ones, just again to clear things up a little bit. Now on this, we're going to do some really ugly stuff, so I'm going to give us a little bit of space to work and paste in a bunch of code. Again, please, if you want this, go to my GitHub page and grab it from there. And I'm also not going to walk through line by line what all of this does, because it will take forever. It's all fairly readable once you have a grasp of how Alpine works. But let me give you the gist of what we're looking at. So this is saying that we're going to start off with open equals false. And then we've got the toggle and close functions in here that handle setting focus when the submenu is closed. Next, we've got a hover function, and this is going to handle the behavior of the mouse hovering over the list item. If you're wondering where this came from, most of it was lifted almost line for line from the Alpine Components button component. I made a few small modifications to it, but nothing significant. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to listen for the escape key, and that's going to close the submenu. We're going to listen for mouse enters and mouse leaves on the submenu and the top menu item. Last but not least, we're going to set IDs on our submenu items, depending on how many submenus we have in our menu, and we'll use those to set the ARIA controls attribute. Now I'm doing all of this here at the list item level because I want it to be available to all the things below it. So the next thing I'm going to do is come down here to my button, and this is going to be the trigger for our submenu on item 2. I've got my ARIA label set there to expand submenu. I've got my ARIA expanded equals false. Now I'm going to add a little bit more Alpine stuff in here, and I'm going to say ARIA controls main menu submenu. And I'm going to tell it that when we click this, we're going to use that toggle function to toggle it open or closed. And we're also going to set the ARIA controls to the ID of the submenu item. You're probably wondering how we go about setting that submenu item. And to do that, we just come down here to our unordered list. We've already got our X cloak set on that. I'm going to set an xref equals panel and an xshow equals open. So that's going to say that when this thing triggers, it opens. And we can see right now as we're hovering it, it's starting to do something. I also want to set an x on click outside equals close, so that if it's open and I click outside, or if I manage to focus on it with my keyboard and then click outside, it closes. And then we're going to set the ID programmatically using Alpine. Let's copy and paste the same stuff over here to the next list item with the submenu, and we'll see how it all works. So we'll copy that to the UL. And then I've got to grab all that ugly stuff from my list item. And we'll put that on this one. If you're wondering what this data PG collapsed is, that's just something that Pinegrow uses to remember whether or not an element is collapsed in the tree view. It has no bearing on anything other than that. All right, so we can see that it's looking good with hover. Let's save this and check it out in the preview window so that we can see everything else. Okay, again, hover is looking good. Check out our keyboard navigation. Enter opens it up. Space opens it up. Escape closes it. This one's not working with the keyboard for some reason, so we'll have to see what's going on there. Tabbing all the way through, though, does close this. All right, so for some reason, keyboard's not working on item 3. Let's check that out in a minute. And we're going to look at our properties. And let's see our button. What we really care about here is our ARIA controls main menu submenu -1. And we can see that my ID is main menu submenu -1. That's good. So Alpine took care of that for us. Now let's see what's happening with the next one. And that's exactly the problem. I put my code in the list item and I put my code in the unordered list, but I never put anything in the button. Let's take care of that. And there we go. Now enter opens that, space opens that, escape works good, tabbing through works good, and we're getting all of our properties. So we're going to do almost the same exact thing for the mobile menu as we just did on the main menu. Come back over to Pinegrow. Let's collapse all this main menu stuff and open up our mobile menu. And here we care about this stuff right here. We've got our first list item. This is going to be nearly identical. Where I've got my X data, and I've got my toggle function and my close function. I do not have the hover function because frankly, I don't want to mess around with hovering on the mobile menu. I've also changed my XID so that it's mobile menu submenu and not main menu submenu. Let's come over to our button and we're going to apply a very similar code there as we did for the main menu. Again, we've got our ARIA controls, mobile menu submenu, xref is button, x on, click toggles, and then ARIA expanded is either true or false depending on whether we're open or not. And then ARIA controls equals my mobile menu submenu ID. Last but not least, I need to come over to the mobile menu submenu. And there, again, we're going to set this to a panel that can open and close. And when we click outside, it's going to close, and the ID is going to be set programmatically. Let's refresh and check it out. There we go. We see it opening and closing on click. It's not doing anything on hover because I don't want it to. And let's go ahead and do that for our second one. So again, we'll come and we'll start with the list item. Boom, got that in there. Then we'll hit that button. I'm just going to grab all of this. And our submenu. So that when we refresh, bring this down, it decided not to do anything. I knew I'd screw something up sometime. And that's my problem, is that I was missing a space between my class and my X data. And there it is. Okay, so let's save this out. Check out our demo. And this is actually what I want. All right, so let's click on that. And we've got our button. ARIA expanded equals true. Click it again, and now it's false. True and false, true and false. My ARIA controls says mobile menu submenu 1, and that's exactly what was created here. We'll check this one out. And I see my expanded turning true and false. I can see that my ID is mobile menu submenu 2. And on my button, my ARIA controls is mobile menu submenu 2. This should all work just as well with keyboard navigation. So let's do it again. All right, there we go. Enter keys working, space keys working, escape's working. And there we have it. Mobile, responsive, accessible menus created with HTML, CSS, and Alpine.js JavaScript. In this very last section, I'm going to take that menu that we just created, and I'm going to show you how we can use it as part of a WordPress template for a custom theme. Up until now, everything that we've done can be done with any editor at all, whether it's Notepad, Vim, Sublime Edit, whatever you choose. This is the only part that really needs Pinegrow. Now, the first thing that we have to do is to take this and turn it into a WordPress project. So to do that, I'm going to click on my root HTML element, come over to my WordPress and say Activate WordPress. This is going to bring up the WordPress settings. I'm going to leave my project type as theme, and I'll give it a theme name of Menu Demo. Theme slug will be Menu Demo. Theme folder, this I'm going to point to my WP local folder that I've already created, and it's going to hold the theme. I'm not going to bother with my site URL. And I will leave everything else exactly as it is. I could change theme version and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to. Save settings. WordPress, export the theme. Yes, files were added to the project. And we can see right here, it's added a bunch of stuff for us. So when we switch over to WordPress and we go to themes, I can activate my menu demo, but it does nothing but bring up the page that we already created. So let's turn this into a real template. I'm going to collapse some of these things again so that we can see it. Now we're going to start by clicking on our main over here. And we're going to tell it to get header, get footer. This is going to be our site content. And then right inside of it, I'm going to add post content. Now when we check that out, we'll see that we've got the content of the post. And I really shouldn't have been quite so sloppy. I'm going to take that out actually. And this time I'm going to add a div. Grab all that lorem ipsum stuff. I'm going to add my post content to that. And my H1 is going to be my post title. That way, it's looking a little bit better. Now we'll come over to our header. And we'll first take care of our logo. For this, I'm going to select my picture element. And under that, I want to select my image file and say site logo. In the real world, I would actually create another field inside the customizer to hold an SVG version that I'd assigned here. But because we're trying to make this sort of quick and dirty at this point, I'm just going to get rid of my source. And we're only going to have an image underneath the picture. But here for the anchor, I want to use site link, and I want to link that to the home page. So now when I refresh, our logo has changed. And it's also linked to the home page. Now we'll actually make the menu work the way that we want it to with the WordPress menu. Actually, before we do that, let's come over and we'll take care of our mobile menu because we also have a logo in there. So we'll do the same thing for figure. I'm going to get rid of this source. For the anchor, I'm going to change that to my site link, home, set the image to site logo. Now let's take care of our mobile menu, and I want to select the unordered list that holds the mobile menu. And I'm going to use our menu smart action. There it is. I'm going to assign this to our primary menu. If I wanted to register a new location, I could, but I'm not going to. Actually, for this demo, let's go ahead and do that. So for this, I'm going to call this mobile menu. And I'm going to register the location and give it a name. And now the way that the Pinegrow WordPress menus work is it's going to take the first list item underneath that UL and use it as the template for all the menus. That's great if you only have top-level menu items, but for submenus, you need to come in and point this at an item with dropdowns. So I'm going to grab this one right here, the LI has submenu, so that now Pinegrow knows to use the first LI for normal non-dropdown menu items, and the menu items with dropdown is going to be LI has submenu for any with submenus. That's really all that we need to do for that. Let's come over to our main menu and do the same thing there. Menu smart action. And this time I'm going to assign it to the primary menu location. I do not need to register it because it's already pre-registered for me. And I'm going to set my menu with dropdown to LI has submenu. We'll save. We will export. And now over here, we can refresh. This isn't going to do what we want when we refresh. I'll show you though. Our menus went away. But when we go to menus, you'll see under display location, we've got the primary menu that we already talked about. And now we have the mobile menu that we registered before. So I'm going to take this all pages menu and assign it to primary and save. And then I'm going to take our short menu and assign it to mobile menu and save. And now with a little bit of luck, we've got something. It's not really working the way I expected to though. Our submenus don't work right. I'm not seeing the indicators there, and my drop downs don't look correct. So let's take a look on the mobile side and see what's happening there. Yep, same thing on the mobile side. Okay, and I actually found the problem here, which turned out to be something really odd, and I'm not sure why this is. But basically the SVG icon that I had used made WordPress choke for some reason. So I went ahead and replaced the SVGs on my main menu with a different kind. And I also, while I was at it, added this little guy over here that's going to tell Alpine.js that when we're open, to rotate the icon 90 degrees, which was also something that I forgot to do in the last part of the tutorial. So now I have this on the main menu. And as you can see, it's working great. Let's check it out on the mobile menu. And refresh. And there it is. That's the one that I want for the mobile menu. These are the ones that I want for the main menu. Now you will notice that this is only a single level dropdown, not a multi-level. That Alpine code could be used to make multi-level dropdown menus, but I haven't done it yet because I generally think that multi-level dropdowns are bad user experience. As always, if you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe or leave a comment down below, and I'll see you next time.